Welcome to the Holding Time podcast. Here we discuss breastfeeding in all its complexity, the ups and downs, the challenges, the triumphs. Whether you're expectant, a new mother, or simply interested, I hope you'll appreciate the incredible warrior women who are featured in this series.
It gets easier as you go on, but at the first it was so painful. I've never considered giving up though, just carried on. I don't really know why, I just enjoyed it, even though it was agony with this horror.
Do you know why it was painful? Like, did you get a diagnosis of tongue tie?
Yeah, he didn't have tongue tie at all. And I checked the latch maybe 20 times. I used various people at the infant feeding team, the Latch League, midwives, health workers, health visitors. But I think when I was talking to the Latch League woman, it was starting to get a bit less painful anyway. And to be honest, brutally honest, I think I just struggled to adapt because I just had really sensitive nipples. There's no getting around it. It was just painful for me. But like I say, after about 8 weeks, it became fine. So there's ways you got to get around it. So, I used lanolin and I used hydrogel pads, and they were an absolute godsend. So that and cold compresses really helped me. So that's how we got through. And now it's a breeze. It's easy to begin with. It's easy. So.
Was it really painful from the get-go, or did it become more painful after the first few days?
No, I think the first day was fine because it was new and it wasn't sore. But then after that, it was painful, like toe curling pain. I know people have described it as that. Did you breastfeed, Lisa?
Yeah, but I had a tongue-tied baby. My daughter had posterior tongue tie, and the pain was, I could actually make my palms sweat now thinking about it.
Really?
It was like a form of torture. It was like having someone turning a nail into my breast.
Yeah. The breastfeeding journey for me has been difficult as well, in that I know my husband struggled a bit. I know he won't mind me saying that we reckon he's got a bit of postnatal depression. It's been quite a hard journey for him for a number of reasons. And I think he found it quite difficult to begin with as well, because when your wife is breastfeeding, he suddenly kind of like, well, where's my role now? What do I do to help? Because it's not equal split anymore. It's me having to do all the feeding by choice. And then my husband kind of like trying to fit in around that. So I think he struggled quite a lot with how best to support me and how to bond, I suppose, with Arthur. And I know a lot of dads will be in the same kind of boat with breastfeeding, in that I think a lot of them find it difficult to bond to begin with, just because it's the breastfeeding is such a personal thing between the mum and the child. So that's been quite a challenge for us too, because I felt I've almost felt selfish in a way, because I chose to breastfeed. Does that make sense? And it's kind of me shirking, or me embracing all the responsibility and perhaps leaving my husband to kind of work around that. So it's been I don't know if that makes sense. It's been a really strange journey in that respect. The older they get, the easier it is, because now I'll go 2-3 hours without feeding him, and then he needs a feed. Nights are still difficult, of course, but I think it's just the first 4 months of I wouldn't say the hardest, but I'd say they're the most challenging for a number of reasons. Only because you're trying to get to know this beautiful baby, and then things get better. So yeah.
How's your mental health been since giving birth? Because you said it was quite a traumatic birth, and obviously you had a lot of pain breastfeeding.
It's been fine, really. It was something I was asking myself the other day, and I have a friend who is suffering from it, and I don't think I'm suffering from postnatal, because I'm just happy. He's brilliant. I love him. He's wonderful. I don't feel down. I'm tired all the time, of course, but that's the way of it. But he's all I ever wanted. I wanted to be a mum from when I was very young. The way the trauma manifests itself for me is I'm due a smear test, and just the thought of people fiddling is traumatic, but I'll just get through it. It'll be fine. So, and I've got help, I'm sorting that. So yeah, that's the only way of it for me, because it was really uncomfortable. I was induced. It took 3 days. Eventually decided to make an appearance by C-section. So that's how it affected me. And that's another point. C-section, I think, with breastfeeding, it takes a bit longer for your milk to come in. And it certainly was kind of, they let me go out of the hospital. He was born at 2:15 in the morning on the Monday. and I was free to go on Tuesday at 11 a.m. But you can barely walk. Like, you're driving home, and every bump in the road you feel. I didn't know the roads are so bumpy. And then, you know, you're in bed trying to get up and feed this baby, and of course I've got labour pain from where my tummy, you know, laboured up here. Then I've got the scar. You don't realise how traumatic, like, a birth can be. I mean, you know, you major surgery, and it's like, well, off you go. You know, you've got a baby now, deal with it.
You know, all of that might have affected your husband as well.
Yeah, I think so, because I think that's the worst thing for them, when you're in pain and there's nothing much they can do. The C-section was the best bit, because by that point I was so tired, and it was just like, oh good, we're going to meet him soon. You don't worry.
Ah. And you got through the breastfeeding problems, and here you are. And
Yeah,
is your husband, is he getting any help for?
Yeah.
His
We're sorting
health?
it. It's taken quite a lot for him to get to that point, but yeah, we're getting help, so that's a plus. It's not been easy. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but here we are. I think that being like the age I am, and maybe it's just the people I surround myself with, but I don't, like, we were away with friends, like 7 other friends last week, and I don't feel any discomfort at all in just, you know, taking your breast out and feeding your baby. I don't think anybody ever looks at you and thinks that's a bit weird. I mean, maybe they do behind closed doors, but I've only ever known support, really, or people just, like, I was in the park, I've covered it with a scarf, and the lady just, like, pretended I wasn't there. So fine, if that's where you want to be, that I don't mind at all. But I think because we live in such open times nowadays, where it's normal to have, I don't know, to choose your sexuality, and to choose your gender, and to choose to make your own choices. I don't know, maybe I've not come across people who are really, really set in their ways and old fashioned about it all, but I was talking to a friend, and she was saying she wouldn't feel comfortable breastfeeding for her own family. And I remember looking at her and thinking, wow, like, if I said that to my dad, he'd be really upset, because to him it's like the most natural thing in the world. And, you know, it's not like, to all of us, it's not anything, it's not sexualized. I don't think breast should be sexualized. And
my dad was actually quite against me breastfeeding. Really? And but he's like, you know, because I'm 40, he was 80 at the time, so he's from like a completely different generation.
Because I remember Mum saying that in the 80s and 90s it practically disappeared. Like, women, was it 60s, 70s, women like stopped breastfeeding because it just, formula was the best thing. On the generation thing, I breastfeeded in front of my granddad, so his great granddad, who's also called Arthur, and he's not remotely bothered. He thinks it's great, you know, it doesn't bother him in the slightest. But my grandma breastfed, so. But I know my mum struggles, but again, the support wasn't in place. So it's like this generation of people, and I talk to friends my age. I'm 27, so I'll talk to people my age and say, you know, were you breastfed? 9 times out of 10, no, none of us are breastfed. Or we were breastfed for a little bit, and then we stopped. So I just think, like you say, generational thing, and now it's a lot of your own choice, and here's the support if you want to do that. So, you know, I'll feed in public. Sometimes I'll use a scarf, sometimes I won't. It depends on how I feel. But I've never come across anybody who's really anti, or who is really awkward, made to feel awkward by me breastfeeding.
Women don't report any problems of breastfeeding in public. Really. If you were to look at the media and search breastfeeding, you'd think that was the biggest problem women have. They don't really have that problem. No. I think fundamentally lots of women have problems actually getting breastfeeding established, because it is tricky. Because of that, most women don't breastfeed. And so you are, by 6 months, you're in 1%.
Yeah, but I find that remarkable, because having got 5 months in now, I don't think I'd ever switch to formula, because we've established breastfeeding. I just feed him on demand. I don't understand why you'd stop now when you've done all the hard work, I suppose. But I guess it's a lifestyle choice, and if people want to go back to work, then I understand it. Is that, I mean, maybe that's me being judgmental, but do you see where I'm coming from, in that if you've got this far, you've done it. So, but again, I remember I went to the doctors with Arthur, because there was something up with him. I can't remember, nothing major anyway. But the doctor was surprised that I was feeding him every 2 hours. But I remember talking to the midwives and thinking, but he's 4 weeks old, 8 weeks old. Of course, I'm feeding him every 2 hours. But you know, I think it's a difference between medical practitioners. You make your mind up, and you know, midwives maybe know a lot more about the breastfeeding side and the baby delivering side than some of the GPs do. People subtly ask you, oh, how long are you going to breastfeed for? And it's like this taboo of, you know, once they're weaned and sort of 12 months is probably the cut-off, and that's it, don't feed anymore. And I mean, I suppose I'll succumb to that slightly, in that if he still wants to feed at night, probably just not mention it to people, because it's not because I'm ashamed or anything. I just don't want the hassle of having to explain myself and justify myself to people that don't need to know.
Is there anywhere particularly in your area that you like to breastfeed, if you do go out and breastfeed?
It's a really daft. A friend of mine, we're both breastfeeding, went to is it the Slave Museum and Maritime Museum? I think. Anyway, there's a bit there where it's quite dark, and there's two beautiful like benches where you can sit and just feed, and not in the way of anybody, and then you get to look around the museum afterwards. Other than that, I mean, I don't go to Liverpool that often, but any park bench, yeah, in Holton I go, and I tend to try, well, when he's asleep I'll try and go for a run, and there's this like 2k circuit route, so if he needs feeding I can stop on the route and sit on this bench and, you know, feed him there.
Thanks for listening, and thanks to everyone involved, our funders, Cheshire and Merseyside Women's Health and Maternity Programme, Arts Council England Lottery Awards for their support, along with all the amazing mothers and partners who have helped to make this project happen. You can find out more about the project by visiting holdingtime.org.